Did you take any classified documents with you from the White House?
I did not.
Do you see any reason for anyone to take classified documents with them leaving the White House?
Well, there'd be no reason to have classified documents, particularly if they were in an unprotected area.
Well, there were classified documents, and they were in, as you report, an unprotected area.
According to a new report from CNN, a lawyer for former Vice President Mike Pence discovered about a dozen classified documents at Pence's home in Indiana on January 19th and turned those documents over to the FBI. The effort was touched off after classified documents were also found at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort and at Biden's office and home in Delaware. And somewhere out there, George W. Bush and Bill Clinton are quietly calling their lawyers to see if they have time for a quick sweep. Pence had asked his lawyer to conduct this search out of an abundance of caution, leading to the discovery of a small number of documents with classified markings within 4 boxes at Pence's home. The lawyer immediately alerted the National Archives, which in turn notified the Justice Department. The FBI picked up the documents from Pence's home that evening. Pence's legal team then drove the remaining 4 boxes back to Washington, D.C. the following Monday to review the rest of the material for compliance with the Presidential Records Act. Pence's lawyer explains, quote, Vice President Pence was unaware of the existence of sensified or classified documents at his personal residence. Vice President Pence understands the high importance of protecting sensitive and classified information and stands ready and willing to cooperate fully with the National Archives in any appropriate inquiry. And of course, when Pence was asked in November whether he'd taken any classified documents from the White House, his response was, I did not, because we live in a sitcom and words don't mean anything anymore. He even went on air as recently as January 12th, just a couple of weeks ago, and waged an attack on Biden for doing, quite literally, the exact same thing he just got caught doing.
The handling of classified materials and the nation's secret is a very serious matter. And as a former vice president of the United States, I can speak from personal experience about the attention that ought to be paid to those materials when you're in office and after you leave office. And clearly that did not take place in this case. But the unequal treatment before the law was deeply troubling to me early this week.
I gotta say, if there's one thing that being in the Trump administration teaches you, it is to offer up the worst aging takes on the history of this planet. At this point, if a Trump administration official says anything, just assume that either the polar opposite happened or that they themselves will eventually be found guilty of doing whatever it is that they're accusing someone else of doing. Now, what's going to be especially striking is the speed with which all those Republicans who clutched their pearls and had fainting spells over Joe Biden having classified documents as a vice president suddenly softened their tones now that Trump's vice president was also found with classified documents. Here's Marjorie Taylor Greene pretending that a vice president having classified documents was the worst national security breach since Hillary's emails.
Well, this is a huge story. It's very serious. As a matter of fact, Joe Biden conceivably stole those documents. What people need to understand is the President of the United States is the only one that can declassify documents, not the Vice President. For Joe Biden to steal documents and have possession of them, this is a serious investigation, and the communists at NARA can't hide it anymore. And Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice, they have to be held accountable if they don't treat Joe Biden exactly the same way they're treating President Trump. It's ridiculous and it's shameful.
And, of course, he wouldn't be treated the same as Trump because, again, only one of these men unlawfully retained those documents after their return was requested and then obstructed justice in an attempt to get those documents returned. If Joe Biden was to be treated the same as Donald Trump, he'd have had to do the exact same thing as Trump. But because he's not corrupt, he didn't. Will that distinction mean anything to Marjorie Taylor Greene? No. What's also going to be amazing is watching the talking point that actually Trump was in the clear because he had the power to declassify documents as president, but the documents that were found in Biden's office were from his time as vice president, and VPs don't have the power to declassify. Now, aside from the fact that Republicans will immediately stop shouting that from the rooftops, it's also important to remember that it was misleading. Remember, presidents have the power to go through a process to declassify classified documents, but just willing it into existence via thinking it doesn't do the trick. And Donald Trump did not go through that process. In fact, we know he didn't go through that process for 2 reasons. First, he claimed that the documents were planted by the FBI. If he had actually declassified them, why would he have to claim that the FBI planted them? And second, if he had declassified them, his lawyers would have brought that point up when they went to court to litigate this exact issue. But his lawyers didn't say a word about declassification because it wasn't true. And they knew that if they knowingly lied to a judge in a courtroom, they'd open themselves up to sanctions or even disbarment. So Trump can lie in the court of public opinion, but his lawyers can't lie in a courtroom. And the fact that they refused to surface this claim to a judge tells you everything you need to know about its validity. So again, if the argument here is that a president can declassify but a vice president can't, just remember the fact that while Trump can declassify, he didn't. Meaning that while these other politicians mishandled classified documents, only one refused to return them to the National Archives, dragged out the process for over a year, lied about it, had his lawyers lie about it, and ultimately forced law enforcement to execute a search warrant in his home. Which is to say, no, these situations are not the same. And look, it's important to remember that just taking classified documents does happen. In fact, it happens all the time, likely to every president and vice president on both sides of the aisle. Here's Republican James Comer admitting as much on Fox News.
Bill Clinton, Obama, Bush, every president had accidentally taken documents that were deemed classified, yet they were never raided. Yet they never were treated with a special counsel like Donald Trump was. Now we find out Joe Biden did the exact same thing that every president has done. So there's a problem here with the National Archives and how documents leave the presidency and follow the ex-president. So this is the concern.
Yeah, I don't know if it's true with regard to President Obama and President Bush, but clearly we have evidence that it's true with President Trump and Vice President Biden.
Our research shows that every president has accidentally taken documents.
Which is to say that this happens. It happens to every president and vice president in both parties. Is that a problem that requires stricter rules? Absolutely. But the real issue here is that only one of these people, amid Trump and Biden and Pence and even Obama and Clinton and Bush, actually refused to turn over these documents that were discovered. Let's not forget that once it became clear that Trump had improperly taken these classified documents, he spent more than a year denying the National Archives' request to return them. He had his lawyers sign an attestation falsely asserting that all documents had been returned. He ignored subpoenas demanding the release of the documents, and eventually the FBI had to present evidence to a federal magistrate to execute a search warrant, and the judge agreed, and then those FBI agents found exactly what Trump had been denying that he had. If you think that these situations are the same, then I am sorry, but you are living on a different planet. So do we have a problem with the way elected officials handle classified documents in this country? It sure does look like it. But let's not conflate that with one man's purposeful, unlawful retention of those documents and the obstruction of justice upon attempts to have them returned. That's the difference here. Republicans know that, and Trump knows that. So they'll lean on these false equivalencies because their only priority isn't protecting national security, it's protecting the leader of that party, Donald Trump. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts.